DJ Scream, heavy in the streets.
We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood. We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood.
Hood rich.
Get it out the mud.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And who dat was very fitting for this event that kind of doubled as appetizer and main course because it was UFC 318 Holloway versus Poirier 3. But the big kicker here that kind of just falls back into all New Orleans sports related things, or just Louisiana sports related, is that this was a pay-per-view in New Orleans, Louisiana, for the send-off final UFC fight for Dustin Poirier to try his retirement bout. But this was the first pay-per-view ever in by the UFC in New Orleans, and it was the first. I want to say it was the first pay-per-view in like 10 years. Not pay-per-view, but just event, like a fight night in 10 years for Louisiana. And one thing that was just kind of a kicker before I get delve too deep into like the card and the results and things like that is that it took me until into the prelims. It was like already the early prelims, all that was wild because there were stoppages in every bout. So maybe because every bout wasn't going until like towards the end of the second or into the third round, maybe I just wasn't taking in all the commentary that I was taking in at first. But took me until the start of just the standard prelims to realize Joe Rogan, for the first time in 3 years, he hasn't done a pay-per-view event inside the U.S. And of course, it's in Louisiana, it's in New Orleans, and it's Dustin Poirier's retirement fight. And Joe Rogan doesn't want to be there for that. You know, obviously it wasn't that big of a deal. Obviously, I don't love Joe Rogan that much because it took what is it? How many fights in? It took five, 6 fights in before I even noticed that he wasn't on the commentary. But still, you know, I kind of understood that he kind of set a precedent on not wanting to do like out of state pay-per-views and didn't want to do like all the fight nights and stuff anymore. But hey, Louisiana, New Orleans, pay-per-view, UFC 318, Dustin Poirier's retirement bout, and you just skip out on that. So I kind of like Joe Rogan, like in the early portions and early age of the UFC, and obviously Fear Factor and all that, the $50,000 winners for that. All that was fun to watch back as a kid, you know, something that was on TV shortly after you'd get home from school and stuff like that. But man, screw a big screw you up yours to Joe Rogan now, which I never really had that feeling about him until now. But just him skipping out on our state, our Louisiana, and Dustin Poirier too. Like, come on. But anyway, so that's enough of just completely irrelevant Joe Rogan, but that's something I wanted to highlight because it didn't even seem like really too many people mentioned it or were aware of it really or cared, but I guess no one really did. I guess I'm caring too much about it. But anyways, this was a appetizer and main course because the event took place in New Orleans, and this was UFC Max Holloway versus Dustin Poirier 3. And this happened July 19th, 2025, so just this past Saturday. And this was in the Smoothie King Center, the home of the Pelicans in New Orleans, Louisiana, United States. And it had the attendance was 18,138, which that's a lot. I don't know if any really Pelicans games have ever had that many in attendance. I think a lot for like a sold out Pelicans game, or sold out Pelicans game. They're down pretty bad now, but a sold out Pelicans game more like 12,000, maybe 16,000. So that's impressive. And then they broke the record for the total gate for the Smoothie Center with a total gate of like 8 million. So that's impressive. So if nothing else, that helps the community, bringing in some money and some tax dollars for a big event like UFC 318. So that helps a lot, and that's nice to see. And it was a sold out event, and people, Louisianians, people that came there to see Dustin Poirier in his retirement bout, and just Louisianians that wanted to see some mixed martial arts for the first time in 10 years. They were loud and they were boisterous during this event. So they were good fans, good fans. So you got to applaud the Smoothie King and New Orleans fan base, MMA fan base, because they were good. And so that's just kind of the stats there. Let's go over the prelims, early prelims, and the preliminary card, and then we'll get onto the main card. So with this preliminary card, the early prelims, I was about to want to say, like, you guys need to thank me for basically reverse jinxing this card, because I was talking big time on the pre-show for this event how it's going to have a super hard time living up to the fight night the week before. Teixeira, no, what was that? Yeah, Teixeira versus Lewis, that crazy fight night that had like eight stoppages on the card. And man, they were on a fast track to blow my last week, the last fight night out of the water, because they went 6-0 to start the card with the early prelims. Every fight on the early prelims ended in a stoppage, and then the first fight on the preliminary card ended in a stoppage. So I was like, whoa, we're already 6 stoppages. There's no way they're not going to be able to get at least 8 stoppages on this card. And then I was thinking, once it started to be decision at the end of the prelims, I was like, man, this is going to end up carrying all the way over into the main card and just be decisions throughout the rest of this card. Man, so I was hoping I was reverse jinxing it there for a minute, but this ended up not being that great of a card. Yeah, the prelims and early prelims would have been good enough for just a fight night, but I think the main card, the pay-per-view part of it, kind of was a little overwhelming, because obviously you didn't get the great send off for Dustin Poirier and a win for that, or even really a great fight. It wasn't even really that great of a fight. Like, it wasn't the fight of the night, and then you just didn't have any stoppages on any of the other fights. But talking more about the early prelims, we got to see Ryan Spann versus Lucas Brzeski, the heavyweight bout that we wanted to see. We wanted to see some beef, and we got to see a guillotine choke win by Ryan Spann at the 237 mark of the first round. And then on to the co-main event of the early prelims. I just listen off some names, not more notable names that were on the prelims on some fights that maybe wanted to catch up on. There was a light heavyweight bout between Jimmy Crute versus Marcin Parchinio, and Jimmy Crute ended up getting a submission armbar at the 441 mark of the first round. And in the main event of the early prelims, you had Islam Dilotov versus Andam Fugit, and Islam got the KO punch on him at the 408 mark. Yeah, the 406 mark of the first round. So that was some of the notable names and some of the finishes that you had on the early prelim. And then getting to the preliminary cards, the main prelims, you had a middleweight. The co-main event of that card was Brendan Allen, who is a Louisiana native, but for some reason it says, I don't know, when I was reading some of the stuff on him before, it says like he was born in Beaufort, South Carolina, and then was fighting out of Dale Ray Beach, USA, but something about him being from Louisiana or something. I don't know. The statistics and stuff I'm reading on doesn't sound like he's from Louisiana, but apparently he is. Has some ties at least. But you had Brendan Allen versus Marvin Vettori, and that went all 3 rounds. And this is where we started going into just unanimous decisions across the board for the rest of the card. You had Brendan Allen win the decision, unanimous decision over him. So you got some Louisiana flavor winning about, and it wasn't all it wasn't all L's, you know. So it could have been worse. And then the main event of the prelims, you had uh, Vinicius Oliveira versus Kyler Phillips, and that ended up just going all 3 rounds as well, and was just a unanimous decision win by Vinicius Oliveira. So the prelims were good, and you had quite some notable names on there, and had a heavyweight bout and a bunch of finishes. So the prelims were just a joy to watch. And then there's I can't say these were bad fights on the main card. We're about to get into them, but man, you want to see a knockout. You want to see a submission at some point, even though these matches, like especially these matches on the main card and the pay-per-view, they're matched up to be such great matches. And sometimes in fights, people just kind of cancel each other out, or it's just they're such high skilled, high level fighters that they don't really get caught in submissions or don't get caught with punches that knock them out. So sometimes that just happens on these main cards. That's kind of where you could say maybe you got a little less experience on the early prelims out of some of those fighters where someone got stopped in all of those fights. But anyways, let's get to the main card now. So been long-winded, but can I get a menu? And so the first fight on this card, UFC 318, Holloway versus Poirier 3. We had a bout between lightweight Michael Johnson versus Daniel Zellerberg. And originally coming into this, this seemed kind of like the only fight where there was a little bit of bad blood, between the fighters, because I guess Daniel Zellerberg was talking a lot of noise about how Michael Johnson was old and had almost as many losses as he does wins, and I guess he put together some type of highlight video of all of his losses by knockout and submissions and put it in a highlight video and put it on Twitter. So that was kind of classless. And Daniel Zellerberg, he's just 23, 26 years old. Yeah, he's just 26 years old. And Michael Johnson's 40 and has been fighting in the UFC since like 2010 or something like that. So for me, I just wanted to see Michael Johnson knock the young big mouth kid out. But we didn't end up getting that. But he did end up getting the win, and Michael Johnson was actually the underdog coming into this fight. But it ended up being just a unanimous decision win for Michael Johnson, and that was 29, 28, 29, 28, 29, 28. And Michael Johnson, he probably won the first 2 rounds, and then you had Daniel Zellerberg kind of playing catch up in the third round, where he's starting to let it go a little bit more, and that's probably the only round Daniel Zellerberg won. But in the first round, you just kind of could see that even though Michael Johnson's almost 40 years old, he looked faster, and he looked like there was a little bit more behind the punches and stuff he was landing. Really, the only good thing that Daniel Zellerberg was doing was he was throwing and landing a lot of kicks. I mean, he wasn't necessarily landing them, but he was forcing Michael Johnson to block all these head kicks and block these body kicks. So Michael Johnson kept getting hit in the forearms trying to block all those kicks. Like that was really the only good thing that Daniel Zellerberg did in this fight. So Michael Johnson just looked a little faster and a little more explosive in the first round, and then even in the second round, I predicted/wanted Michael Johnson to get the KO, the knockout in this fight, and I almost thought we were going to get it in the second round, where he threw like right as like Daniel Zellerberg was kind of coming in, he was throwing kind of like an over, like kind of in between like an overhand right and a straight punch, and that dropped Daniel Zellerberg, and we had a little bit of a scramble. And it looked like, it has a kinch in my teeth. Maybe I'm going to start the the pay-per-view off and start my predictions off 100% right away. But we didn't end up getting that. Daniel Zellberg composed himself and then maybe even won the third round. But yeah, so Michael Johnson getting the upset over the young gun, I guess, here. So we started not by methods. We didn't get that right, but we got the pick right, and Michael Johnson winning this. All right, so now then, on to the second fight on the card. We had a featherweight bout between Patricio Pitbull versus Dan Ige, and so this is the second fight in the UFC. So for Patricio Pitbull, so we were hoping or maybe expecting that we'd maybe see a little bit more from him, a little bit more earlier in the first and the second round, where he's not relying on if he loses maybe two of the first three rounds, that he's relying on the fourth and the fifth round for him to be able to catch up. And I think we got that out of him, and kind of similar to the Michael Johnson Daniel Zellberg fight. Patricio Pitbull, he just looked a little faster and a little stronger, and Dan Ige just didn't seem like he could land a whole lot. And then so that's kind of just seeing how Patricio Pitbull just kind of edged Dan Ige out in the first round, and then in the second round, Patricio Pitbull, it was kind of more of the same with the stand up, and I think he rocked Dan Ige like once or twice, and then in those moments where he kind of had Dan Ige on his heels, you were seeing some decent combinations where he looked like Patricio Pitbull was trying to get Dan Ige out of there, and then he just started taking Dan Ige down and pretty much holding him down and kind of going for like some half-hearted submissions. I think he got him onto his back rear naked once, and but was never able to sink any of those in. But yeah, Patricio Pitbull kind of just cruised to a victory, winning the first and the second round, and then in the third round, kind of once again, kind of like the Michael Johnson Daniel Zellberg fight. I was almost thinking Dan Ige was going to get the knockout in the third round, because we had Patricio Pitbull, like we were saying, in the second round. He started going for some takedowns, and Dan Ige was starting to get taken down by Pitbull and was being able to get back up at times, but he was definitely getting controlled on the ground for like way too long. But Patricio Pitbull, he went in for like a takedown, shot for a takedown, like right as Dan Ige was throwing like a head kick. And so Patricio Pitbull landed, like it ended up being like a knee, like right to the side of his head. And that got Patricio Pitbull rocked a little bit. And I was thinking, oh, we're actually, Dan Ige is going to pull this out and get the KO for me, because I predicted Dan Ige to win this fight by knockout. But he ended up losing by unanimous decision. And Patricio Pitbull was able to compose himself and not get finished. And so that bout ended up not going my way with the pick. I picked Dan Ige to win, or the method, because he didn't win by KO, and it ended up being another unanimous decision that went 29-28, 29-28, 29-28, and that's just a three round fight there. And like I said, Patricio Pitbull probably won the first and the second round, and just that high kick, head kick / knee that Dan Ige landed on Pitbull in the third probably won him the third round, but it was just not enough. He needed a stop. He needed a knockout or a submission. All right, so that's the second fight on this card. On to the third fight on the card. We had a welterweight bout between Daniel Rodriguez versus Kevin Holland. And this fight also went to decision. I think we've mentioned that already, but this fight went decision as well, unanimous 29-28, 29-28, 29-28, and that was a three-round fight as well. And man, Daniel Rodriguez was just throwing caution to the wind in this fight, was just coming in with crazy explosions and just swinging punches all wild. Like, I'm really surprised Kevin Holland wasn't able to catch him and not knock him out with just with a counter punch or something, because Daniel Rodriguez, he was just crazy, chin up, throwing wild punches. But It was enough to overwhelm Kevin Holland. I thought the first round was kind of even. You maybe could have said Kevin Holland won the first round, but then the second round, Daniel Rodriguez, he landed a straight right on one shot that knocked Kevin Holland down and had him scrambling to get his wits about him again. And then towards the end of the second round, it happened again, but Kevin Holland was just able to survive. So definitely Daniel Rodriguez won the second round. But then in the third round, uh, Kevin Holland's had Daniel Rodriguez kind of up against the cage and kind of let it loose there for a minute, just throwing some combinations, and he threw a good uppercut that just stiffened Daniel Rodriguez when it landed. Like it looked like it knocked him out. I thought he was gonna fall on his ass there, but he was able to come back to relatively quick and and uh, and come out of that. But maybe you could have said that Kevin Holland won the third round and then maybe won the first round. But then after getting all that to all that combination and that sequence that Kevin Holland had against Daniel Rodriguez, where you could maybe say, oh, he won the third round, he ends up getting taken down by Daniel Rodriguez and just getting owned the last like minute and a half, 2 minutes of the third round. Like Daniel Rodriguez just gets full mount and is just punching on him, and Kevin Holland's not doing a whole lot to get out of it. And yeah, impressive win by the almost 40-year-old and Daniel Rodriguez, just definitely not knocking Kevin Holland like almost back of the line in the welterweight, where it was going to be felt like it was going to be just one or two more impressive wins by Kevin Holland, and then he would be maybe a title contender or at least rumblings for it. But yeah, got dominated by Daniel Rodriguez. That was a wild fight. All right. So, oh yeah, that's also what I wanted to say. That was something that Kevin Holland's, I guess, mentioned after the fight. There was several times where uh, Kevin Holland's actually had Daniel Rodriguez in what, like a Darce choke. Like he got him standing up a couple times. I think that's how he won his last fight. Got him in a Darce choke, and I guess Daniel Rodriguez, because he has a bald head and all sweaty, he just every time Kevin Holland's tried to sink that in, and Daniel Rodriguez just slipped right out of it. I think Kevin Holland's had him in an opportunity at the end of one of the rounds to maybe try to get a rear naked choke, and similar thing happened. It's just like he just was too slippery. And Kevin Holland's even said, I think it was probably jokingly saying it, but said, man, it felt like his head was a bar of soap. So that was kind of funny. And that was like really the only other time that Kevin Holland's maybe even got close to taking an advantage or maybe winning this fight was those couple Darce choke attempts that were failed. All right. So now then, on to the co-main event. Uh, we have just a standard. This isn't a title fight or nothing. That was kind of my knock on this card, is there weren't any actual official like world title bouts, and there was only one like clown show kind of, you know, gag reel type of belt being defended in the BMF title. So that was a knock on this card, and definitely a knock on this card is you can definitely knock this card after it ended, because definitely the main card and pay-per-view wasn't overly exciting. But we have just a standard middleweight bout between Paulo Costa versus Roman Kopylov, and that bout ended up going to decision. But I predicted that to go to decision actually, and I think maybe a lot of people would have thought that would have been a wild prediction coming into this, with just how many of Roman Kopylov's in his 6 of his last 7 fights, all the six wins he won by knockout stoppage. And then on the same breath, Paulo Costa had only won like one fight in 6 years. So you're thinking that this is just build up and made for Roman Kopylov to get a knockout and maybe set himself up for a middleweight title eliminator, or probably like a 5 round middleweight bout, like maybe in a main event or something, to set him up for a title opportunity. But man, he just looked lost in there against Paulo Costa. Paulo Costa just dominated them like wherever they went. They didn't really go to the ground all that much. I think, yeah, Paulo Costa, he tried to go for a couple like half-hearted takedowns like in the third round, but it was mostly just Paulo Costa uh, uh, landing landing harder strikes and landing more of them, and just Roman Kopylov just didn't seem like anything he landed affected Paulo Costa at all. Like he just was like walking through him like a Terminator. So it's like you could definitely see like the effects of what Paulo Costa was throwing at Roman Kopylov, and there's like didn't seem like it was even affecting him with the shots that were coming back to him at Paulo Costa, and that just went across the whole three rounds of the fight, and was just mainly a kickboxing bout for the whole fight, and just Paulo Costa pretty much I think he won all three rounds, but it ended up being a decision unanimous 30-27, 30-27, and then 29-28, and kind of like those first two fights on the card, you could have said, well, Roman Kopylov kind of turned it on at the end of the fight, but Paulo Costa was able to cruise to his second victory and second win, only his second win in like 6 years after being such a freight train to start his career 13-0. But so yeah, I actually like Paulo Costa. So even though I picked Roman Kopylov to win this fight, actually by decision, I actually was happy to see Paulo Costa get back on track. Like I'd like to see him back in title contention and fighting those high level fighters. Because I mean, he hadn't won a lot of fights in those past 6 years, but everyone he was fighting was for like a title opportunity or for a title or someone that had the title before. So I was happy to see Paulo Costa get back on track, and an impressive win at that. So, all right. So now then, we are on to the main event of UFC 318. We have a lightweight championship bout, actually a lightweight uh, for the BMF title bout, defended by Max Holloway, the champion, versus Dustin Poirier, the challenger. And I originally picked Max Holloway to win this fight by decision, so I thought that was going to happen. So this is the only fight on the card where I actually got the fighter and the method correct. So yeah, I was happy about that. But honestly, there were moments in the fight, like the few moments that Dustin Poirier had in this fight. I had my lineage and my honor to Louisiana sports and a Louisiana native had me starting to pull for him, even though I picked against him. But that was more just because I thought he was kind of washed, and I don't really trust picking someone that's literally stated like this is my last game or this is my last fight, because that gives them an easy out to say, usually I would stick in here a little bit more or take a little more harder punches, but seeing how this is the last time I'm ever going to have to do it, might as well go ahead and check out early. But so I didn't pick Dustin Poirier, but there were moments where I was like, man, it'd be kind of nice if he did pull this out, but that's not how it happened. But this did end up going decision 48, 47, 49, 46, 49, 46. So I got two of those judges maybe really only gave one round to Dustin Poirier, but you could have maybe argued that Dustin Poirier won maybe the third and the fourth round, and they were going into the fifth round 2-2 because Max Holloway in the first two rounds, I would say won the first two rounds because they're just kickboxing mostly, and towards the end of the second round, Max Holloway landed a good shot that rocked Dustin Poirier, just dropped him to his butt, and Dustin Poirier kind of had to scramble to get his wits back to him, and then obviously the round ended shortly after that. And then similar to that, Max Holloway did it again, and it was looked a little more serious, like he's maybe going to be able to get Dustin Poirier out of there. But Dustin Poirier showed that he's tough. Didn't necessarily pull the card that oh, this is my retirement fight. I might check out early. He didn't do it there. And then like Max Holloway was saying, like he thought after the second round that he kind of had Dustin's number. Like he knew what he was doing. He was countering him. He knew what his next move was, and he thought he was going to be able to get the knockout and get him up out of there. But then Dustin Poirier drops Max Holloway towards the end of the third round, and looked like he had him hurt pretty bad, and he was landing a little bit of uh, a couple shots, like had him kind of up against the cage, down to like one knee, and was landing shots. But then Dustin Poirier probably did like the stupidest thing he could have done in this fight, and pulled guard and pulled to guillotine that was only sunk in for a couple seconds before Max Holloway was able to get out of it and then get his wits back to him. But that was probably, I would say that's probably the round that the two judges definitely gave Dustin Poirier. I guess the one judge, the first judge, maybe had Dustin Poirier winning either the it had been either the fourth or the fifth round. So then you got kind of a lot more just kickboxing in the fourth round. And like I said, you maybe could have edged Dustin Poirier out there, not necessarily because he was landing more volume and was the more technical striker, but what he was landing, he was throwing about half as much as Max Holloway, but what he was landing looked like it was causing more damage and being more effective when he was landing on Max Holloway, because you could see the bruising and the blood and the black eyes and all that Max Holloway's, and Dustin Poirier didn't really have a lot of that. And then we get into the fifth round, and like I said, it's more of the same. And then you get to the last 10 seconds, and it's like the Justin Gaethje, Max Holloway bout, where it's last 10 seconds. This is two historic fighters, legendary fighters, UFC, um, future Hall of Famers, and you had Max Holloway pointing to the ground again, like, let's just wing it out the first last 10 minutes. And Dustin Poirier obliged, but after he took about one or two good shots in that flurry, he ended up clinching up, and it just kind of, I don't know, seemed kind of like the bitch move at the end of his career, like clinching up in a flurry at the end of the last 10 seconds of his last UFC fight against Max Holloway. It just kind of seemed like a kind of a bum ass move, but I understand why he did it. He didn't want his last fight and his last memory in the UFC to be him sprawled face down on the mat, sprawled out like Justin Gaethje. I think Justin Gaethje still plans to fight one more time. So, not I don't think was the greatest send off for Dustin Poirier. And I was in the other room during his entrance, and once I heard he was his entrance was coming and his song was playing, and you heard like Lil Wayne and stuff, I had to like rush back over to the other room because I thought Lil Wayne was going to come out like rapping and like dancing in front of him, but he was just like walking behind him with like a Dustin Poirier UFC shirt on. So that was lame. I thought he was going to have a better intro than that. I thought it was going to be better than that, and I thought they were going to have maybe like a highlight video of his career, kind of like they did for Anthony Johnson. But hell, Dustin Poirier is like 10 times the fighter as him, and they didn't give him that, and that was on a freaking fight night. But anyways, that's UFC 318, Holloway versus Poirier 3. I ended up only predicting two of those fights right, and only got one of them where I picked the right fighter and the method right. So on picks and I guess methods didn't do all that great on this card, but would have loved to have seen a knockout by Dustin Poirier. That would have been wild to see some of those comebacks by either Dustin Poirier, Kevin Holland, Dan Ige, where they pretty much got dominated the first two rounds of those fights. But yeah, seeing some comebacks in those fights would have been nice. All right, so let's get to the bonus awards here. So the fight of night ended up being Brendan Allen versus Marvin Vettori, which that was a fight that ended in unanimous decision, and it was still another fight that wasn't as close as people try to make it out. At least the judges didn't, because it was 30-27, 30-27, and then 29-28 in a 3-round, 5 minute 3-round fight, or 15-minute 3-round fight. But honestly, for fight of the night, hell, I thought the welterweight bout on the main card between Daniel Rodriguez versus Kevin Holland, which was also a similar unanimous decision, but it was more 29-28, 29-28. Like, it was a wild fight with just crazy flurries, and it looked at times that maybe Kevin Holland was going to come back and win towards the end of in the third round. So I honestly thought that the welterweight bout between Daniel Rodriguez and Kevin Holland was the fight of the night, because towards the end of it, when it was about to be over, I was thinking like, wow, this is such a crazy war I just watched. And there's 2 fights still left on the pay-per-view. There's still the co and the main event are still left. So I was a little surprised that wasn't the fight of the night. And then you had performances of the night. Atabe Abaga Guter was, let's see what that was. That was a knockout, TKO punches at the 110 mark of the first round over Robert Valentine. That was the first fight on the prelims. And then you had Islam Dulatov. Let's see, Islam Dulatov. That was the KO punch over Adam Fugit. KO punch at the 406 mark of the first round. And then Carly Judas knocked out Nikolai Cullery, a women's flyweight, and that was at the 130. Yeah, the 130 mark of the third round, and that was TKO, knee to the body and punches. So that was fun. So quite a few bonuses handed out on the night. 3 of the 4 came in the prelims, early prelims, and standard prelims. And then I really didn't think the fight of the night was the correct pick there. But anyways, so that's UFC 318. Just kind of like I was stating before in the pre-fight show, that this there's a lot of pressure on UFC 318 to perform and live up to after the crazy fight night that we had just the week before. And like I said, I was trying to reverse jinx it for you guys. I really was. And I thought the fix and the jinx was in with the first 6 fights that started all coming in knockout. But then we came to a screeching halt after that. Not saying the rest of the prelims and the pay-per-view weren't enjoyable to watch, but definitely could have been better. You could have had some crazy submissions, some crazy knockouts, or even crazy comebacks in fights that ended up being like split decision. But there was really no controversy at all on this card. And just looking ahead at the next fight night, this gets me riled up a little bit as to why there weren't better fights. Like they just, it's too watered down now. UFC is, because there's fight cards like every week instead of just like 2 a month. But hell, I mean, you have Robert Whitaker versus Rener de Ritter, Peter Yan versus Marcus McGee, Bryce Mitchell versus Saad Nurmagomedov, Shahar Bullet versus Mark Andre Barrial. Like, come on. You don't think you could have taken maybe 2 of those fights and put it on the pay-per-view for New Orleans, the first one all time, and made it a little more spicy, a little more interesting? I guess not. And that's what it landed to. Just the overall, I'm just kind of canceling out. It's just the pay-per-view, a little underwhelming, but I expected it. But anyways, I think that's about all I have for you. So who dat? And can I get a check, please?